I'm with Redistricting Insights, the company consulting with you for the redistricting. And what I'm going to do tonight is just walk through the drafts that we've received, as well as 2 public submissions that we've received. Just as a kind of starting point for this, generally what we expect, having done these meetings before, is you guys may like some of these maps, you may not. This is an iterative process, and this meeting tonight is mostly to get input for you and kind of give you something visual to see to start the conversation. So you can look at the maps, you might have 1 or 2 that you like, but you still want to make adjustments to them. We can do that and move forward and make those changes for you and present them again in the next meeting. So we have this first one, scenario 1, where we have these 5 districts right here. And so we'll start with this large yellow one right here, which takes up this kind of large, mostly the northern and eastern parts of the district. You can see here the population in this district. It's population deviation, which you may remember from Matt's presentation. We want the total deviation to be well under 10, preferably. Generally, we aim for 5%. So you can see that this one, we're starting with, at least for this district, population deviation of just being 0.04% over. And then the largest minority CVAP population that you're going to have in all of these districts is going to be the Hispanic CVAP. So you can see that this district has 43.6% Hispanic CVAP. Move on to this one. So this district here, you can see, takes up kind of the north.
One question. So remind me the difference between the CVAT and the total count. So on that one, there were 43.6 is CVAT. Those are voters versus a 58.25% Hispanic. So the difference is kids?
Largely. So CVAP is citizen voting age population. Okay. So there is citizenship involved in that too. The other thing to consider is that CVAP is calculated by the American Community Survey, right, which is different than the census. Right. So it's a survey, so it's not a complete enumeration and calculation of everybody. But yeah, it is citizen voting age population, not necessarily voters, since it doesn't take into account registration, but citizen and voting age population.
So Eddie, you're still on scenario 1.
Yes.
So you're just hopping around to each of the 5 zones.
Yeah.
And drilling into them. Okay.
Yep. Looking at the numbers and letting you guys see the district. So now we're zooming in on this.
That's zone 1. The purple up there, or whatever color that is the pinkish purple. That's zone 1 based on the map I'm looking at.
Right. He was talking about the one that was outlined, zone 4.
Yeah, so this one is labeled Zone 1 right here. You can see it's in the northeastern part of Visalia. We can see Oval Park is kind of a central part of this district. This one, deviation is still under 1% over, so 0.11% over. And this one is 60.65% Hispanic CVAP. And I think as we move through these, you'll find that the densest population of Hispanic CVAP is going to be in this northeastern part of Visalia. And so generally, districts that have parts of this northeastern area will be more, have higher Hispanic CVAP numbers. And then we'll move to this southern district here, which is labeled District 5 for Scenario 1. So this one, you can see the deviation still very low, 0.15% over and 42.21% Hispanic CVAP. And then we'll move over to this one labeled District 3. This one takes up the southwestern portion of the district includes Goshen. This one is 0.25% under deviation, so that means it's a little bit below the target population. 35.29% Hispanic CVAP, a population of 33,036. And then finally, we have this one that's labeled District 2. Again, takes up a little bit of that kind of northern part of Visalia above Green Acres. So this one is, again, under just a little bit, 0.05% under deviation population. This one, we get back up to kind of a higher CVAP population, Hispanic CVAP population with 40.95%. Are there any questions or comments on this first draft? Again, one of the nice things about this Google map is that we can kind of zoom in and drill down to specific lines, and you can see specific landmarks and different areas. So if there's kind of a school or a park or any community of interest that you think you'd like to see the border of, we can look into that. Any questions on scenario one?
This is one of the scenarios that your firm created, right?
Yes.
What was the basis for it?
So for these, we generally try to get an idea of, so we start off with census designated places. With this district, there's not too many. It's mostly Visalia, Goshen, and I think there may have been one other one. Ivanhoe was probably the other one. And so we tried to keep those as whole as possible. But then again, when there's so few and we only have a couple, I think Goshen and I think Ivanhoe didn't even fill up a whole district. For all of them, we have to cut into Visalia. We try to look for main streets. So that might be good dividing lines. So you can see 198 is a lot of times used as a border for these. Goshen Avenue was used as one. We tried to, I believe in one of the drafts, I looked at school districts. And so we're, again, part of the reason for this is that we get more input on communities, because that's kind of what we have to look at is census designated places. We can look at communities that we have boundaries for, like school districts and stuff like that. So that's what we take into consideration. But communities of interest are anything to anybody, right? So there's some cities that we've worked with are really big on neighborhood councils, and that's what they see as their communities. For others, it might be more loosely defined, and some see streets, like main highways, as a big dividing part in their community. They think people north of a street have sort of one identity of community, and people south of a main street have their identity of community. So those are kind of things that we all try to take into consideration. Kind of for us, coming at from a high level view, trying to take in all of those things into consideration.
3 or 4 scenarios.
I believe we did 4, 5, and then we have 2 public inputs.
And of the 5 scenarios, how is your thinking different on each scenario? Do you have any idea? I don't know if you were involved in creating the maps. Oh, okay. So how did the different maps, how were they based on different thinking?
So so for the first one, I generally look at census designated places and then try to draw from there. And then as I'm drawing and kind of drilling in, I might notice, especially looking at Google Maps, that it seems like, especially once I get an idea for the centers of population. So when I was first looking at census designated places, I figured Visalia would have to be split up, and that would be the primary center of population, but I wasn't quite sure how much that center of gravity would be. And so after drawing a first map looking at census designated places, I kind of got that idea. And then I started looking. And so for this one, you can see Oval Park just seemed to me as an outsider like it might be a natural community, that there might be something around that. And so I tried to kind of build something around that. I think in other maps, this area, I could see Green Acres, anything where I can see Google Maps has a neighborhood, kind of take that into consideration. And then also the other big thing, honestly, is population deviation. I'm trying to keep that pretty reasonable. And then I'm also looking at CVAP numbers. So there might be other maps. There's one where I specifically tried to get, see if it was possible to draw 3 Hispanic CVAP numbers. And I know that that's possible. It cuts up communities. So that's up for the board to decide what priorities they want to set. But it's the same thing for me, even just drawing these first drafts, as it is kind of an iterative process. I start with census designated places, draw a map from that. Now that I've got a feel for the center of gravity of the population of the district, maybe I'll draw another one looking at school districts. And then now I've got a feel for that too. I'll start taking in neighborhoods. And so it's a complex kind of experimental process for me, and that's why we welcome generally these meetings, to get more insight from people who actually live here, live in the communities, and maybe know a lot more about those lines.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe looking at the scenario 1, I'm just visualizing that you start with a 183 square mile boundary of the district,
Yeah.
plot the population, and then you have a computer application that you press the button that says, give me 5 equal zones, because your deviation in this scenario 1 is 0. I mean, you actually achieved the deviation of 0%.
No, that was just luck. So, I mean, sometimes it happens. So, for me, coming from a numbers background, the deviation part is the easiest part for me to grasp, and so that is something that's easier for me to kind of follow. And I do try to keep deviations tight, just because for me mentally, that's the easiest thing for my mind to gravitate towards. And then I also try to take in consideration understanding neighborhoods.
One might just be all population driven. I'm just going to start with that as kind of the base model, but then I'm going to start iterating after that and looking at the CVAP, and now I'm going to look at neighborhoods and things like that. Still thinking about that deviation.
Yep.
But at least I have a place to start. Now I'm going to start refining it.
There's also another big one for me is where I start drawing. So for this one, I started on the outside, and you can see why that yellow district is so big. And then once I realized that Visalia is going to be a really big center of gravity population-wise, I might start in Visalia and then try to build out from there in another draft. And so kind of where you start, where you draw your first district, and working around that also has influence on how the rest of the districts are drawn, right? Because you can't draw one here and then draw one here and then draw one here and expect them all to fit together just randomly. You have to start somewhere and then move on. So that is another part of my process. But any questions or comments specific to scenario 1? Anywhere you guys want to drill down on?
Okay, let's move to 2.
All right. So scenario 2, we will start by looking at this Northwest District, which is labeled District 4. So this one has a deviation. It is slightly under. So you can see that this one takes in Goshen and then goes down to 198 as its southern border, and then comes in and takes in part of the northwest part of Visalia. This one is 42.82% Hispanic CVAP. And then we'll move over to the green one, the northeast version of this. And so this one takes in all of Ivanhoe and then comes in and takes in parts of Visalia's northeastern version, and this one does cross the 198 to take in a little chunk here. This one's deviation is a little bit higher than what we've seen so far, so 3.09% over. And then this one would be just majority Hispanic CVAP, so 50.43, just over 50%. And then we'll move on to this central district right here, labeled District 5. For scenario 2, this one is 0.26% under the population deviation, and this one also just crosses the threshold to be a majority Hispanic CVAP population, and this takes in much of the central Visalia area. It takes in Green Acres. This one does split Oval Park, and I believe it splits Beverly Glen as well. And then here we have this labeled District 2. This takes in most of the southeast portions of Visalia. So you can see this one is just under 0.55% deviation and 43.88% Hispanic CVAP. And then finally this southwestern district that takes in the southern part of the district, southwestern, labeled as District 1. This one is negative 1.14% under for deviation and 34.87% Hispanic CVAP. So this one still tries to keep kind of those clean borders that were mentioned. We do cross some areas that might be considered significant borders. So the 198 gets crossed right here. And then we do split some of the kind of larger neighborhoods that are mentioned on the map. But still overall, this is a map. Any questions or comments on scenario 2?
Well, just as a visual, it makes a lot more sense than what we have today, no matter what the rest of the numbers say. When you look at what we have today and you look at this, it's like, there's something coherent, at least.
So if there's nothing else, we'll move on to scenario 3. And so for this one, we'll start in this southwestern quadrant. So I believe this one may just barely split Goshen a bit. So we have West Goshen Avenue right here as the northern border. Above here, not too different from the previous draft, except you see that it is pushed a little bit further west and a little bit further north to make up for that loss in population, but it does still kind of reach in here to get the population that it needs. It is 0.19% over for population deviation and 32% Hispanic CVAP. And then moving over into this one labeled District 2, taking up the southeastern portion of the district. So this one is negative 0.44% under deviation, 39% Hispanic. You can see this takes up most of the southern portion, southeastern portion. We do use, for most of the district, Walnut Avenue is the northern border here. And then we'll move up into this kind of central district here, kind of central eastern district. So this one, labeled District 5 in this map, it is 0.53% under the goal population for deviation, and this one would just cross into being a majority Hispanic CVAP. You can see this kind of takes in both sides of the The 198 really kind of a little bit different from what we've seen in the other ones in that it's more of a long, thin one that stretches from the eastern edge of the district and then just goes kind of towards the central part of Visalia to get the population that it needs. And then we'll move up here north from that. Another northeastern district, so labeled District 4 for Scenario 3. 0.58% over the population goal deviation, so 59.13, so getting fairly close to 60% Hispanic CVAP there. And then finally we have this one labeled District 3. This one takes in most of Goshen. You can see pretty similar to the last one, but gets pushed up further north, just under the deviation goal and kind of creeps into here to reach the population that it needs around the College of Sequoias area. Any questions or comments on Scenario 3? Any particular dislikes or likes about this map? Any notes at all? All right, we can move on to Scenario 4. For this one, let's start in the center. So you can see this is kind of a very central Visalia district, labeled District 5. Again, kind of matches about the higher deviation that we saw in one of the previous drafts, 3.3% over, 35.85% Hispanic CVAP, and takes in most of this, again, kind of surrounding the College of the Sequoias area and reaches down a little bit south down here, going down to Avenue 280. And then for this one, we also have kind of another fairly central district to Visalia. So this one is 1.51% over the population deviation, 50.78% Hispanic CVAP, and takes in kind of a large portion of the rest of Visalia, staying pretty central to Visalia, taking in that eastern side.
Is there any reason, like, it just seems, this one seems more, I guess a lot of these have it, that top left corner, northwest corner, just, why not bring in that extra block? And it's like half of the street. It would connect two major streets.
Which one? This one?
Yeah, that's a good example of one, but, or with the top left, the furthest northwest corner.
Around here?
Yeah. What is, like, if you take that to the corner, that's pretty small.
Yeah, so another thing to consider with these is census shape. So this one,
I guess I'm just saying, yeah, I guess there's a fair amount of people there.
yeah, so it would probably be a fair amount of people, not the biggest thing. One of the interesting things that I know I ran into a couple times, and I think this was the one that I remember, this might be another one, is we are working with census blocks, and so we're kind of limited to the shapes that they give us to work with, which are generally pretty small, and especially in cities, typically not as much of a problem, but occasionally we can definitely look into these.
It's just interesting to me.
Yeah, we can definitely look into and make sure
Something of interest to me.
that, okay.
When you, so obviously, 183 square miles, again, that takes up the district, there are very defined census tracts inside of that the U.S. government uses.
Mhm.
And so when you want to grab this population, you want to add it to the zone, because I'm trying to get the zero deviation, you have to grab that whole census tract. You can't say I'm going to grab half of it and pull it in. Pull them in by census tract by census tract.
Census block.
On the back of this guy?
Right, so the draw your own map has an outline of all the census tracts. So that's.
Yeah, so we draw by census.
Oh, so that's probably a lot of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we draw by census blocks. So the hierarchy is block, block group, tract, and then I think from there it goes to county and state. I believe in the paper map we included block group just because blocks are so tiny that it does get I think it does get difficult to even have the numbers show up on it. So we have block groups on the maps, I'm pretty sure, so that way you can at least see numbers and get an idea of the population. And they are generally still fairly small to where you can draw a map out of them. But yeah, in the software where we can do stuff like this and zoom in, and on days redistricting, I think might be an option as well. The census block is the option on there. But yes, that's another challenge with this, and another challenge with reaching population deviation. Not so much in your district as in others, but yeah, that you do have to take in the entire population from the block. You can't split the blocks, and that is something that we are kind of bound to. As a side note, though, the census does usually around the halfway point try to take an input from the states and groups, getting input on what those block shapes should be. So something to consider next time that comes around. I think we covered both the purple and the green already, so we'll move up to the northern district, this one labeled District 2. So this one is one comes over 0.17% deviation, population deviation, 51.52 Hispanic. This one keeps Ivanhoe whole and then takes in kind of some of the margins of Visalia that it needs to reach its population goal. And then we have this one labeled District 1, taking up the western part of the district. You can see this one takes in all of Goshen and then stretches into kind of the northern part of Visalia, northwestern part to achieve its population. We get at 0.93% over. And this one is also, I believe, 51.15% Hispanic CVAP. And so this one is the one where we have 3 majority Hispanic CVAP populations. So you can see we do achieve that, kind of goes along the margins of Visalia here, but we do achieve 3 Hispanic CVAP populations, while being a little bit less following those quadrants. And then we have this final district here for this scenario, District 4, taking up the southern part of Visalia, 0.68% deviation, 34.87% Hispanic CVAP. Takes in most of the southern portion. You can see it has a little bit of Judson population where it reaches up to get the population it needs and kind of cuts down to give up the population it needs as well. Any questions or comments on scenario 4?
I actually like this one because it took into consideration the high Latino or Hispanic population we have versus the other maps that kind of cut the city really awkwardly to exclude the majority of the population we have here that's Hispanic. I really appreciate scenario 4. Thank you.
Yeah.
So how were the other ones excluded? I don't know.
I don't understand that either.
So the way they were all.
Well, of course they include people that they live there, but if you look at the CVAP numbers going through the zones,
Right.
and you just look at the numbers like right here for
Right.
the ones.
Right.
So I went through all the maps and just checked off which ones
Right.
had, and so the other ones only have like one like this one, map, scenario 1,
As one,
only one.
Right.
And the other ones didn't have
right,
the,
right.
see that person.
Okay. Yeah. One thing I would say is that has 2, that has CVAP above 50%, with the next highest being 49, so I mean, that's pretty much there. And then this one has 3, but the next highest one is 35. So that's interesting.
And that's kind of part of the nature of it, right? If you kind of put more into one district, that means fewer in another.
Right.
And so that's just how it goes. If you get, one that's 50%, or the 3 that are 50%, you're right. The next highest one drops to
9 is really
30.
one person, right? Which doesn't make all that much difference, does it?
It could or may not. It would depend on kind of.
I mean, getting above 50% does nothing, right?
It would depend on kind of voting patterns of the populations, right? If there's greater levels of racially polarized voting or lesser. And then there are other considerations, because I think in my first one, I think you can see that you would see one district that has 60%, and that would mean that the other districts,
Packing, right?
exactly, it would be kind of similar to packing, where it means the vote population is kind of not as effective in the other ones because you have so many in one district.
Just one person on the board there.
Yep, exactly. So it's just,
I didn't like that.
it's so something to take into consideration. Again, like I mentioned at the beginning, one of the challenges with that is that most of the really dense Hispanic CVAP population is really concentrated in that northeastern area. And so they're really well concentrated to draw 1 really easily, 2 pretty easily, and then it takes a little bit more to draw 3. But it's certainly something to take into consideration. Again, as Matt mentioned with his presentation, that is something that does need to be taken into consideration. Any other comments? I think that's the first comment I've gotten about a particular like or dislike about a map to take into consideration.
Well, the other one was, Carl
And-
mentioned having a kind of logical
Quadrants, that's right.
design
We
was alike.
I like that. And so, I mean, I kind of see a few things that we need to really focus on. One was, and my takeaways from the first meeting were the state and they don't like this gerrymandering thing to make it look like there were certain areas that were either included or excluded. Second is the areas of not necessarily minorities, but groups that have been, I can't remember exactly what Matt said, but somebody had said that Hispanic is not a minority, it's a majority, but it's what did he call it? A group of historically marginalized groups. So we need to take that into account, right? So CVAP of the Hispanic population, and then also just general population. So those 3 things are the things that I'm thinking about. Just blocking the CVAP for Hispanics, and then having the deviation numbers. So those are my main 3 things.
Okay,
We're on scenario 4, are we done there?
I believe so. We'll move on to scenario 5. All right, and for this one, we'll start in this eastern district right here, so labeled as District 2. So this one is under by 2.99% from the goal deviation, 43.92 Hispanic CVAP. And you can see this one, the goal here kind of mostly takes in the eastern part of Visalia, so it does kind of cross that 198 barrier there, but takes into kind of these eastern areas. And then we move on to this yellow one labeled District 4. So this one is under by 0.36%, 37.96% Hispanic CVAP. And this one takes in really this kind of central and southern part of Visalia. And then we have this western one stays south of Goshen, might take in a little bit of Goshen. Deviation is under by 1.36%, 29.91% Hispanic CVAP. And then we have this very large northern one, well, large by area. It is 3.33% over for population. It is majority Hispanic CVAP, takes in Goshen, and then kind of stretches over and takes in this northern part of Visalia, and then reaches over and takes in Ivanhoe as well. And then the last one from this plan.
Any issues with this zone? I know in the current map there was talks about having Ivanhoe and Goshen. I don't know if it was half of Ivanhoe was taken and half of it was not. But it feels like this kind of is the same overarching as number 1 in our current one. Would we have any issues with that in this map?
Issues as in just the concept of taking them.
About how Zone 1 under our current setup, it takes Goshen and Ivanhoe and puts them all in one.
Zone 5.
What's that?
Zone 5 in the current setup.
Well, one and
Oh.
5 are split, so.
Oh,
one
so I
is
think this
top
kind of
them.
fixes that because it.
So it does take into both, and that's certainly something to consider. Whether they would want that. Do Goshen and Ivanhoe want to be separated? Do they want to be together to be kind of this outside Visalia district? That's a point of consideration to take in. So I don't know the answer. I don't know what the citizens of Goshen or Ivanhoe would prefer. It could go either way, certainly. So,
Thank you.
yeah. And then finally, this one, District 1, you can see it takes in the northern part of Visalia, 59.97. You can see this one, I kind of went back to that idea of kind of building one around Oval Park and that area there. Any questions or comments on scenario 5, or I guess general comments on all of the drafts that we have provided before we go over the public submission maps as well?
I like this one as well for the same reasons Ambar mentioned. There's 2 CVAPs, and then the third one is at 49 point something, so that's very close to 50% as well. And then the next one from down there is 43, which I think makes them all pretty close. But yeah.
All right, and we'll kind of do the same thing with the public submission. So this one we have version 1. We'll start with this Western District, so labeled District 5 right here. So this one is 0.21% over, 31.14% Hispanic CVAP. And you can see it includes Goshen and then takes in kind of the western parts of Visalia. We come here to this Southern District, District 4, negative 0.01% under, 36.03% Hispanic CVAP. And you can see this takes in kind of that central southern area of Visalia. And then we have this second district here, which comes across into this eastern part, 0.4% over deviation, 49.91% Hispanic CVAP. And this northern one takes in Ivanhoe, and this northeastern part of Visalia, 0.24% deviation, 52.02% Hispanic CVAP, and then negative 0. Or this final district, District 3, labeled here, 0.84% under deviation, 54%, 54.42% Hispanic CVAP. So going back to that conversation, another one where you have 2 majority Hispanic and then 1 just on the edge there, 49.91%. Any questions or comments on this one? Or actually, Angel is here, and so he'll be able to answer any questions or comments. So I'll just move on to the public submission 2. We have this first one on this eastern side, 0.09% under deviation, 41.07% Hispanic CVAP. And you can see these following along that kind of quadrant idea, doing a good job there. We have District 4, just under 0.36 deviation, 37.96% Hispanic CVAP, so tight on deviation, another good quadrant. You can see it takes in this College of the Sequoias area. We have here this one labeled District 5, so it takes in just under Goshen, and then the western part of Visalia, negative 1.36 population deviation, 29.91 Hispanic CVAP. And then we have, similar to the other draft, kind of this outside of Visalia district that takes in Goshen and Ivanhoe and takes in just this northern part of Visalia right here. 1.66% deviation, 54.69% Hispanic CVAP. And then finally this one here labeled District 1 takes in this good northeastern neighborhoods of Visalia. A good quadrant here, tight deviation 0.15% and 62.02% Hispanic CVAP. And if there are any other comments or questions, just in general about the maps, or any feedback that you would like to provide for us to keep into consideration, so we know we'll look at quadrants and very much take into consideration Hispanic CVAP. Any other input, or just try and keep clean lines in general? Any other input or feedback you would like for us to take into consideration as we move forward with this?
Board members, good afternoon or good evening. My name is Angel. I'm with the EMC, which is the Equitable Coalition Map. We have been working around the clock doing redistricting work in Tulare County. So I'm honored to be here presenting, and I'm honored to be able to submit a map, and I'm honored to be, to be part of the community. The first thing that we need to do is that we need to remember why redistricting is so important, right? We need to ensure that redistricting happens every 10 years, and we need to ensure that it's the highest statement in the Constitution, right? So redistricting is the most important thing that can happen to a regular citizen. This is why effective redistricting and getting a complete count is extremely important, and I was part of that as well. The second thing is that the Equitable Map Coalition in 21 worked in redistricting efforts with great success through the Central Valley. That includes state legislature. We withdraw the lines. Fresno, Kern, Kings, Madera, Merced, Tulare County Board of Supervisors, as well as other cities, districts, and health districts. The most important thing about redistricting is CVAP, or voting rights zones. You guys call it zones, other people call it districts. Drawing VRA zones protects opportunity for communities from protected classes to elect candidates of choice, right? Then we consider other factors: city, place, political lines, compactness, communities of interest, and that would be the sand in our little jar that we have back here. But the most important thing is the big rocks: VRA, VRA, VRA. The 2020 census data ensure that California readjusted prisoners, inmates, back into the part of the zone that we're in, which is pretty much all of Visalia, Ivanhoe, and a little part of Farmersville, right? Citizen voting age and CVAP in 2019 blocked assigned, and 2020 block geography. We also used software and web development applications to ensure that geographical reassignment of 2020 geography was done correctly. Extensively communication with residents, community leaders from parts of Tulare County, and collaboration with the Tulare County organizations, League of Women Voters, former elected officials, county staff, redistricting community advisory board members, LULAC, DHF Vecinos Unidos, and conservation interests and others. This beautiful graph that we have right here, it shows the data that you guys were able to present me with last time, and you said that the last time that redistricting happened here for you, for Kaweah health zones was in 1990. So we can see that in 1990 we had 98,000 people living within our zones, and then in 2000 it went up to 150,000, which and 109, right? And then we can see that the numbers begin to change and add up. This is by new development, people moving in, Los Angeles, San Francisco getting too expensive, so on and so forth, right? Oh, and the Central Valley being an awesome place to live. That includes myself, that I moved from LA to where I currently reside in Tulare. So we see that the increase keeps happening every 10 years, right? And the other thing that keeps happening is that the Latinos keep increasing and the white people keep decreasing, but at the same time we see that the Asian population was increasing, then it decreased, and then it started increasing again, right? So that's what we need to take into effect to make effective zones, right? So with having those numbers, I was able to go home and use Dave's Redistrictor, like Eddie said, and I was able to make the first map. In the first map, I don't know if you guys remember, but I was sitting right here, and I said that I wanted roughly 3 Latino majority districts, right? And I went on and so forth, 2 VRAs, and right? So when we did that, you could reach, 3 Latino majority districts, but they're not effective. And the key word in redistricting is effective districts. That's what we were looking for, and that's what I drew, and it was able to be done well, but it wasn't effective. And then the other thing that happened was, if you see right here, you're able to see like a little crab claw, and that's a big dangerous thing because that would put in jeopardy Kaweah health with litigation, and we don't want to go there. We don't need to go there, right? So I hate it too, I assure you. So we didn't want to go there. I was like, no, I can't do this. This is not what we're gonna do. The population is brought down to 32,000 people, and we do get Latino majority districts at 55%, at 50%, and 54%. But that's just population. That's not CVAP, right? So when you put the CVAP numbers in, those numbers drop drastically. So we didn't want to do that again because it's not effective, right? The key word here is effective zones. So that led to, not sleeping a few nights because there was a little crab leg there, and I was like, that can't be happening. So then that led to the creation of the second map, or the second public submission. Here, working with the demographer Jesus Garcia from EMC, we were able to work together and we started piecing things together based on communities of interest, based on public comment that we heard from the county, the city, school boards, and all of, and also when We Draw the Lines was drawing, we were able to use all of that to put together this beautiful map that you see at public submission number 2. So public submission number 2 is and does create 2 effective majority districts, right? In zone 1, we have 32,892, and the Latino percentage is 61.7, and in zone 2, it's 32,983, and the Latino is 40.8. And zone 3, we have 33,538, and Latino is 54.6, right? Zone 4, it's 32,852, and Latinos are 37.6. And the last one, zone 5, is 32,785, and Latinos are 30%, right? So once this map was created, we were able to, submit the map, and we got numbers back. So this looks a lot better. This looks healthier. This looks, more effectiveness, right? That's the word of the day, is effectiveness.
Angel, question, how do you define effective? Is it a certain CVAP percentage that you want to get over?
Yeah, anything above 55% would be effective. Yeah, HCVAP, yeah. So that would be effective.
That's why you said that. There was a question that came from the public on Facebook. So Lucia Vasquez asked if the board would be willing to consider common criteria to make it easier for people to understand. And they mentioned having 2 Hispanic CVAPs over 55 to 60%. So that's consistent with.
Yeah. And then this is an analysis I did. The total, the deviation at the top, that one it's wrong. The software malfunctioned this morning, so I apologize for that. The total deviation for the entire map is 2.29%. So it's way under the 10% by the law requires. So that's pretty decent. That's the other thing that we were looking for. It's, effectiveness, low deviation, and make sure, people get to represent, you get to pick a representative of their choice. The second thing is legal compactness, or compliance, I'm sorry. Hispanic citizen voting age population, HCVAP data is essential measure of Federal Voting Rights Act compliance in Kaweah Delta health zones, right? The proposed map reflects HCVAP majorities in 2 zones, ranging from 54.9 to 62.4, which is zone 1, 62.4, and zone 3, 54.9. The other thing is continuity. All 5 districts are geographically contiguous. Communities integrity. That came from people speaking up at the Board of Supervisors saying that West Goshen and Goshen needed to be kept together, which it does. People in Visalia City said that they wanted Green Acres to be kept whole, which it does. The Oval to be kept together as communities of interest, which it does. The lakes are kept whole, which also came from Visalia. St. John Parkway is also kept whole, also came from Visalia. Shannon Ranch is kept whole, also came from Visalia. And Black Oaks is kept whole, right? All communities of interest remain in their respective zones, and their communities have not been split apart. For city and CDP integrity, 2 identified significant landmarks which were used are Mooney Boulevard and Highway 198, which goes through the entire zones. Identifiable boundaries. The current zone are represented using influable boundaries such as West Goshen and Goshen, Mooney Boulevard, Dainua Boulevard, Ivanhoe, North Part or Farmersville in the Oval neighborhood zone. When it comes to compactness, Zone 3 is the least geographically compact because it goes from Goshen all the way to Ivanhoe on the northern part of the zones. And the last thing is no political party. I know earlier you guys were talking about we need to know where we live and all of that. I don't know where any of you live. The map was drawn based on data analysis. The map was drawn based on communities of interest. The map was drawn based on what we heard at the county, the city, and other places. The map was drawn by people coming to meetings and saying, hey, don't divide us, make sure we stay whole. That's why the map was drawn the way it was. Do you have any questions so far? No? The summary, the 2020 census confirms Latino population is over 50% of the total Kaweah health zones population. Effectively, you can draw 2 majority Latino Kaweah health zones can be created. The extensively discussion and collaboration with residents and community leaders from all parts of Tulare County led up to creating several proposed maps that can achieve this goal. And lastly, EMC map is compliant with the Voting Rights Act and the Fair Maps Act. So it does follow all the law requirements. And that's how we got to where we got. Questions, concerns, statements, anything you need me to go over?
Do you have that, the list of criteria, do you have that sheet for
That one?
that? Is that a handout for us?
Angel, is that's included in the PowerPoint you sent me?
Yeah, I can go ahead and resend it because I do need to change the deviation at the top.
It is on our website now.
Yeah,
I loaded it this afternoon when Angel gave it to me, so it's not on our website.
Thank you.
yeah.
And what's the number that needs to be corrected at the top?
At the top is the deviation number. Originally it was 1.53, but that has been changed because of the software malfunction to 2.29. Yeah, so it's way under the 10% that the law requires you to have. Any other questions, concerns, statements? Anything I can answer?
I have a statement. I just want to commend you and wonderful presentation. We thank you for your input. I think it's a good map, so congratulations. And, thank you for your input. We really appreciate you being involved.
Thank you. Thank you. And this means a lot because I'm a GIS student at CSUB. So the fact that I'm here, it's quite an honor, to be honest. Anything else? Oh yeah, one last statement. Public submission 1, I will be withdrawing that one, so you don't have to consider that map. I'll stay with number 2.
Yeah, I thought it was 1, and I was like, oh man,
Yeah, 1 is the one that, 1 is the one that has the little crab leg right here, or little crab arm, whatever you want to call it.
Did you first submit number 1, but then kept thinking about it, playing with it, and then?
So yeah, so I went on Dave's Redistrictor, and I kind of had an idea of what I wanted, because like I said, a lot of input by community members for the county, the board of supervisors. But then this little claw didn't let me sleep for a couple of days. So then I spoke to the demographer, Jesus Garcia, and then he was like, no, I mean, it's a good map, and we got to get rid of that. And it's a good thing I got rid of it and we fixed it, because based on the comments you made that you wanted lines that look, really clean, you didn't want any, thing that says packness or impacting or gerrymandering, as they call it. Yeah, so yeah, this map will be withdrawn and not submitted officially.
We do have a comment on the chat from Jackie Martin, which says the second public submission map makes the most sense.
Okay.
thank you, Jackie.
I just want to comment that I'm really thankful and appreciative that you brought information from other meetings. Like, I had no clue Black Oaks or whatever they're called wanted to see it as a community. It makes sense, they're a housing development, but it didn't even occur to me to think that way, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, other comments or questions from board members?
For the whole meeting or for Angel?
For the whole meeting, but Angel as well. Yeah, I want to thank you, Angel, for putting this together and putting the other data too. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And so I have crossed out number 1 and it will cease to exist in my file.
Yeah, but it was a good map because that led to creating map 2, right? So, you know, it just wasn't effective, which is what we were looking for.